Where does one go about finding it?
It'll be up on our website.
Thank you. Our daughter wants to see it, but she has to work, so she wants to see it later.
Good morning, Miles.
Good morning, everybody. Just waiting for the last few people to come in. We're expecting almost 100 people.
Wow.
We're just going to give it 1 minute more and then we'll make a start. Well, my clock is saying 10:33. Am I being heard? Give me a wave to show that my voice is coming through. Yay, excellent. Okay. So, welcome everybody. This, I think, is the first of our winter series of our Zoom Friends of Patronato lectures. So I welcome you all. I'm Miles Green, Executive Director of Patronato San Javier. And I wanted just to start by giving a few shout outs and announcements. We're about to launch into our major fundraising season with our Patronato's Christmas at San Javier special that this year will be December 10th and 11th at the Mission. Almost 700 invitations went out to our concert friends at the beginning of the month. And we're going to be opening to the public across this weekend. So if you've never been to the concerts, it truly is a magical evening, almost 100 youth voices into the all performing in a candlelit mission. It really is an exquisite evening. And for many people, for years, it's kind of been considered the start of the holiday season in Southern Arizona. And then later in December, on the 14th, we're going to have a special performance. We've got a collaboration with Invisible Theatre. A Californian playwright, Fred Pitt, is going to share in a program called Aren't You? His amusing recollections of his visits to all of the missions across the California series and some of the encounters he had by chance on the way. So that should be a fun afternoon of theatre. Friends of Patronato are welcome to attend on the Saturday. Proceeds from that performance will be coming to Patronato as a gift to us. So it's both a wonderful way to have an enjoyable afternoon of theatre plus raise some money for us too. And then while you're on our website, Patronato San Javier, you might check out our shop. If you're absolutely devoid of holiday inspiration, we have a number of mission-related products, some of them extremely exclusive and special. So while you're on our website, do take a look at the shop. And with that in mind, let's turn to today's presentation. The Retablo Facade at the entry to the mission is one of the most complex projects that we've undertaken to date. Firstly, there are decorative and structural elements, and so it's going to need a specialized team of consultants to really manage different phases of the project. We're also dealing with the impact of an earlier restoration that took part in the 1950s. While it was done somewhat sensitively and carefully at the time, clearly across 70 years, conservation principles and practices have changed quite markedly. And so our team is looking at a different approach this time, and this is really what we're going to be sharing with you today. The other thing that kind of takes this project into a new league, you may have seen in the paper last month that we were awarded specifically for assisting with this project, the largest grant Patronato has ever received. This is coming to us from a program through the National Park Service called the Semi-Quincentennial Project, which commemorates the 250th anniversary of the birth of the nation. And so these are very prestigious grants. And of course, with everything federal, they have to be run through all sorts of review processes. So even though we had initial plans to have scaffolding start to move up on the front of the mission around now, we're now having to wait for some of the components of the review process to be completed. But our goal is to hopefully get scaffolding in place before Christmas, and if not, soon after Christmas. But the good news is $750,000 is what the grant will provide, and it's going to give us a chunk of money towards what we're tasking is about a $1.4 million project. We're looking at this taking place over at least 2 years, maybe 3, with scaffolding going up in the winter months, and then the summer being used for planning phases. And so that's kind of what we're going to be telling you about today. And let me introduce the team of players. Um, I don't know where she appears on your screen, but Star Hercadillo is Patronato's conservation program manager. So she is tasked with sort of coordinating all of the complex pieces of this puzzle, working very closely with Tim Lewis and Mathilde Rubio, who are our longtime conservators at the mission. They're independent contractors working through the company to hone restorations. And so they will be working very closely with Star as they have been working on aspects of the interior of the mission and have also been involved in 3 prior projects of investigation of the facade. So they're kind of our go-to experts. And it's Mathilde who's going to share some of the work that she's been doing, planning for some of the decorative components of the facade. And then the last person I need to introduce you to, and I don't see her on my screen exactly, but Susie Moreno is our full-time preventive conservation specialist or technician. She's based full-time at the mission and is responsible for coordinating with the mission maintenance staff, making sure that all of those interfaces between conservation and maintenance are carefully protected, and working with the teams to do minor repairs and also monitoring critical issues across various aspects of the mission so that she and Star are working closely, because oftentimes that work develops new priorities for us all. So that said, let me hand off to Star, who's going to introduce today's discussion, Secrets of the Facade.
Okay, can people hear me? Nod. Nod for me if you can hear me. Okay, good.
Yes.
Well, thanks for joining us. I'm happy we have such a great turnout today, and I hope this talk lives up to its name. I think we'll at least show you some secrets or things that people don't know unless they've really, really studied some of these photos that we've been looking at. So I'm going to give a little bit more background on the project, and then introduce some of the key photographs we've been using and historic depictions. And then I'll hand it over to Matilda for the second half, and she's going to talk about how she's been using these to study a couple of specific elements, the Estipite columns and the statue of St. Francis at the very top of the retablo. So as Miles said, this project involves some different preservation approaches. It's a pretty complicated one. We're looking at, sort of this decorative surface, and a big goal, a big part of the project is just going to be to stabilize that and preserve as much of it as we can. And then we're looking at multiple elements that are actually already reproductions or that have been so heavily modified over time that they no longer look anywhere near how they used to look. So those elements, we're looking at this statue at the very top. St. Francis used to be a statue of a human. You'll see a picture of a saint. Now it serves as kind of a modified flagpole. And we're looking at the columns. So these Estipite columns, the engaged columns here, are cast stone, kind of cement-based reproductions that were installed in that 1950s work. We're also looking at reconstruction of the central balcony, which is another 1950s era reproduction. So just some terminology so it doesn't get too confusing. We're going to be referring to different tiers. So tier 1, we're talking about the columns down closest to the ground, 2 is the middle, and 3 is the very top. Oh, and just a note before we get into the details on this, I just want to be clear, when we're looking at this project, it's easy to, I mean, it can be hard not to simplify, but there's still a lot of decisions to be made about a lot of this work. So what we're showing you today is kind of a glimpse into our process of how we're studying these elements and how we're making sure that we really understand them before, in order to, think about how we might reproduce them if we do. So Miles mentioned we got this incredible grant from the National Park Service, so we're now working with them to review all of our work. We're working with the State Historic Preservation Office, and we're also doing a lot of discussion and outreach with other professionals and the tribal community as we kind of consider our options for reproducing some of these elements. All right, so jumping into these historical depictions, when we first started researching for this project a few years ago, our first step was to consolidate all of the best historic imagery we could find into chronological order and begin carefully reviewing them. So this sketch from 1852 is the first known depiction of the church. And it's not a photograph, so we can't take it as, hard and fast evidence, but it does appear to have been made with careful precision. We can see that we have all 10 columns in place. And we can see there is a statue at the top, which appears to be intact. So remember that for when Matilda's going to take over. This is one photo of a set of photos that are some of the earliest ever taken at the mission. They were made by Italian-American photographer Carlo Gentile in 1868. So you can see in this photo, all 10 columns are in place, though one on the first tier, it's a little hard to see if your screen is small, but one is partially deteriorated. We're also missing a finial up here. Yes, and you can make out that there's a statue at the top. It's a little bit dark, but there's definitely a statue and it still has a torso. Would everyone mind muting their videos just until we get to the question portion? It's hard with this many people on. Okay, we have this great photo by photographer Timothy O'Sullivan, who was a famous 19th century American photographer. He photographed the Civil War and then photographed 2 major geographic surveys in the West. And this one is a really important image for us because it's the best detail shot we've found so far that shows that statue of St. Francis at the top. So that's the cropped image to the right from the same photograph, just a little bit manipulated. Yeah, so you can see by this time, just 3 years after Carlo Gentile was there, we've already lost 2 of these Estipite columns on the middle tier. So 2 are gone. The rest is about the same. Then this is one of the images with the best resolution that we have. This was made in 1880 by Carlton Watkins, who was another kind of highly acclaimed Western photographer. he photographed using these mammoth plate negatives. So he was using glass plate negatives around 18 by 21 inches, which is why all of his images are really nice and crisp and really helpful for us. So this was still taken, 7 years before the earthquake of 1887. And it's taken from inside the atrium wall, so you can get this nice clear view of the facade. And yeah, you can see that a closer glimpse of these two missing astipites, a better view of this one that's partially deteriorated. You can also see the balcony is pretty far deteriorated by this time. So look at that broken column there. The astipites were originally made of low-fired brick around a wooden core, and then they were covered in plaster. So you can see the same construction method on the columns inside the church. That's kind of a cool glimpse of the core. All right, and this photograph is by Albert S. Reynolds. He's a Tucson-based pioneer and photographer, taken sometime shortly after the earthquake of 1887. So now you can see both finials are missing at the top. That one came down. This statue is now just a skirt. It's missing its torso. There are now 3 columns missing from tier 2, or missing. This one also fell, and 3 missing from tier 1. So we're missing both those and these, or this one. This image, which I wish was a little bit crisper for us, but it was taken by Peter Goddard Gates during the Museum Gates expedition in 1901. And we can see they're beginning to make some repairs. So these balconies have been repaired. They used the corbels that were in place, but they replaced with new railings. They've also done some patching to the base of the wall, which was pretty heavily eroded. And yes, you can see another column is gone. We've lost the east column on tier 3. So now we only have 1 from each tier remaining. In 1928, there was some excellent documentation done that was spearheaded by Prentice Jewell, who worked with photographer Charles Eggington, I don't know how to say it, to photograph the facade and interior of the mission using a wooden scaffold. So we get these really nice detailed sections, and they kind of went, there's like 9 sections on the facade, and they just went section by section, kind of documentation style. So we get a lot of great detail. And this photo I've included shows that last remaining column on tier 3. And you can really see how elaborate the relief designs are. So then in 1940, the entire campus was documented by photographer Donald Dickensheets for the Historic American Building Survey, which was a WPA era program that put out-of-work photographers and architects to work documenting the nation's heritage. So we get, I think, now I can't remember how many photos there are in Santa Fe, but it generated a ton of photos, and there again, these great large format glass negatives. But in this photo, you can see that the upper column has been lost. So now only these 2 remain. Which brings us to the removal of the columns in 1942. So there's a whole folder of documentation about this project or process at the Arizona State Historical Society. And Matilda's going to walk you through that process a little bit here, but it's really interesting. They're trying to decide what to do. They know it's a safety hazard because these deteriorate and fall. These were kind of barely hanging in there, so they wired them to the building to kind of stabilize them, and they're working with the National Park Service and Dr. Emil Howry at the University of Arizona, kind of trying to get everyone's thoughts about how to safely remove them and preserve them. So initially they were hoping to impregnate them with chemicals that would kind of consolidate and preserve the actual columns themselves. but the war made those chemicals scarce, so they ended up using another method. So I'll let Matilda take over and talk about that now.
So Mathilde, I think you need to unmute.
Yeah, good morning.
You're going to have to unmute again.
Yeah.
There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. Well, in this photo, we are seeing what is left of the two columns in the Pier 1, Pier 2. So you see the conditions, they are really too full. So the idea to make castings or to make a reproduction, it was also for security, not only an aesthetical solution. So we see all the wires around the columns, and still today we can see some of the nails in the facade where those or these cables were tied on. Next. So the idea to make reproductions is like we used to do it in the old times. Just involve the pieces in plaster of Paris using vegetable fiber to give more consistency to the pieces, because if not, it will crumble in the way. And then this process to do with the two stipites that were left. Before going to the next photo, I want all of you to check the photo in the right, the capital, that piece. That's similar to very simple leaves. Okay, next. Okay, the photo in the left, we see in the second tier, the column is already wrapped in the plaster of Paris. The photo in the middle, both stipites are wrapped with board and with what do you say, with ties, no, to keep it together. And in the photo in the right, you see how they are putting the stipites down with the help of some kind of crane lift. But look at the guy in the scaffolding. I mean, it was no OSHA in that times. That guy is such in danger. It's crazy. Okay, next. The interesting thing is that instead to send the stipites prepared already to California, to Los Angeles, where this G.S. Watkins, the gentleman in the photo, he was gonna make the replicas. They were stored in the church for 10 years. We don't know exactly why, maybe because the war, I don't know. But then finally they went all the way to California, and this guy made the replicas by pieces, by elements. Next. And these are the result of the replicas. You see, they are pieces, elements. The one in the left is the first tier, and the one in the right, the second tier. That's the only information this Watkins had to make the replicas. And then what he did what they did when they put the stipites in place was turning the column. So each time you see one different image to make it well, different, nicer, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, next. So in this photo of 1960 is one of the first photos that we have with all the replicas on already. And now we are going to see a couple of details. You see in tier 1, the photo in the left is 1880 with the stipites, the original stipites really very much in place. And the one in the right is what we have today. Next. So if you see in the left, surrounded by the blue circle, is what I call the onions, is those elements, that decoration, they are gone right now. You don't see it. You see like 2 segments, but they have very few similarities what it was originally. Next. In the tier 2, the same problem. If you remember when I told you, remember this little detail. Okay, see the ones on the top is a reproduction of canal leaves. In the photo of the stipites that we have today, they are gone. They were lost in the trip to California or coming back, but they are not there. One interesting thing I would like to point in here, see the photo in the left, where it's supposed to be the other stipite that now is gone. It's like a silhouette. Okay, during our studies in 2002, 2021, we have proof that that area was painted in red. And what you see, the silhouette is where it was the stipite before. And the other interesting thing is, if you see the capital of that is similar to leaves, that's an element. The stipite is gone, is full, but that piece, the capital, is still there, which gives us the clue that the stipites are not holding the cornice, and the cornice is not holding the stipites. They are different elements, which is good for us, because and then we can treat them as different elements that we have not to depend to each other. Next. And talking about the tier 3, since there was no stipite to send to California, we have at the left what it was the original stipite according with the photo 1928. But the one today has nothing to do with the original, because they have nothing to replicate. It was nothing original left. So what they did was recreate the tier with pieces of the second tier pieces. Not recreate the tier, no, recreate the stipite with pieces of the second tier pieces. That has nothing to do with the original. Next. So what we did is, as Star said, what we want to do is be very accurate. We don't want to invent anything. So we were studying very carefully all the documentation that we have in hand and open to even check more that if we get in the future. So in this slide, you can see at the very left is what we have now as the replica in tier 1. At the right of the drawing is the best photo that we have, at least to recreate how many elements, the shape of the elements, and more or less the size of the elements that in origin it was at that level. With that photo, I made the drawing that you can see in between those two photos, at least have an idea of what was in there. And then using all photos, exterior and interior, to see the elements, the different decoration in the different elements in each piece of the stipite. Next. this is the same process for tier 2. At the left of the drawing is what is now. At the right of the drawing, the best photo that we can find. And then in the right, all the elements, the best photos that we could find of all the elements, so we can do a reproduction. Next. In the tier 3, we just forgive about what we have today, because it has nothing to do with the original. But we are lucky to have this wonderful photo that we have all the decoration very crisp, very concise. So we have enough documentation to recreate the decoration. Next. So this is what I came through with all the documentation that we have. We can say that this is really very, very close how the stippities look in the origin. Can you go back, Stan?
Sorry.
Yeah, no. At this point, I will say if you guys have any questions concerned to the columns before we go to the sculpture of the on top of the facade. No questions? Better.
Yeah, I have a question. On tier 1, didn't I see a photograph of some sort of a top element that was sort of like a squashed oval?
Yeah, what I call onion. Can we go to
Onions.
that photo?
Mhm.
Yeah, right. No, go forward. There, right there. Up in the upper right hand.
Mhm.
Oh, you mean the ones that are in color?
Yeah.
This is in the interior, in the east transept.
Oh, okay. So those are not on the on the outside. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's in the, because we think it's very similar, or at least give us clues of how, because when they did the facade, we are sure they were looking some of the elements inside, the stippities inside, the ones in the main altar, the ones in the transepts, to have ideas how to make the decoration in the facade. This is what we think.
And that would be a fun picture to include if we do this talk again, but sometimes the motifs are the same on the inside. They're just painted. They're not done in the plaster relief. They're just painted in 2D, but they're a similar design to the outside. So we've been looking at both.
Mhm.
Yes, I also had a question.
Yeah.
I may have missed this, but could you describe what the original material or the material of the original columns were?
Start, Robbie.
Sorry, say
If
again?
you do it, Matilda, you know.
Pues, going back with the similarities in between outside and inside, the stippities are made by bricks, adobe bricks, wrapped or covered by plaster. If you see in this same photo, the element way at the bottom, you can see the bricks. Can you see it?
Okay.
Here.
Yeah. And then inside is this core of wood that we see in other photos. And we found the same core of wood in the west transept. We have photos where we made the conservation treatment at that part.
So it's a brick substructure with plaster decorative. Okay, and is it the traditional lime plaster?
Lime and sand plaster, yes.
Lime and sand. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is just to chime in. The interior columns, if you hold a mirror up behind
Hmm?
them, they didn't decorate the back of them with plaster, so you can see all the exposed brick. And like Matilda said, when they had scaffolding and they were working on the west transept at the very, very top, when you could actually look at the top of one of the finials of the Estipite, you could see a little wood core. So it's interesting that we're using the same technology to make them outside and inside. Any other questions? No? Okay, maybe we keep going.
Yeah. Okay. Now we are going to talk about the sculpture on top of the facade. As we said, we don't have a photo of the complete sculpture. So when we were thinking about to make a reproduction, I had the idea to have the saint looking down to the crowd instead looking up. But no, we have this photo or this drawing from 1852 that really shows that the person, the saint in there, is looking up and is also with a halo. Halo. And then there is, or there was doubts who could be the one representing in this sculpture, if it was San Francis of Assisi or San Francis Xavier. Okay, we have all the evidence to know now that is San Francis of Assisi. Now we have the photo made in 1928 of Charles Eggington and some other photos, old photos where you still can see the lower part of San Francis. He is wearing the Franciscan cord. So this is one of the symbols of the Franciscan's habit. It's pointed with the red arrows. And still today, in this photo, at the bottom, made by us in 2008, there is a little bit of piece of the Franciscan cord in there. Behind the cement is, or we hope is, the rest. Next. And this other photo, you have seen the general photo of O'Sullivan, 1871. The best photo that we have of the sculpture, of the most complete photo without the head. And then we have also the second element to prove that this is a Franciscan habit. The Franciscans has these loose, big sleeves. Instead, the Jesuits, they have tight sleeves. So the habit is completely different. This is a Franciscan habit. So it has to be San Francis of Assisi. The curious folding that he had at the upper part of the habit or the is we have the reproduction in the interior again. In the west transept in San Francis of Assisi, we have exactly the same folding, and so in the I'm not gonna say the underwear, but the lower habit underneath this decorated habit on top. And in the east transept, San Didacus of Alcala, exactly the same model of habit. And this, we were consulting several images of San Francis of Assisi in other books, and we couldn't find this. So we are beginning to think if it's something very concerned to the Baroque, or even this side of the world, no European style. So this is important to everybody to know that this saint was San Francis of Assisi. Any question?
That's it.
That's all good.
Yeah.
Bye.
Any questions generally, people? If you're reluctant, feel free to pop them into chat and I can review them.
Would you talk a little bit about the balcony reconstructions and the relief work on the front, some that's original and some that was reproduction?
Star, I'm going to field that to you.
Yeah.
Sure. Oops, sorry. Did that just, I don't know why that just happened. Sorry, give me 1 second to reshare my screen. There we go. Yeah, so the balcony. I didn't prepare specific photos of the balcony, but that's something we're looking to reproduce as well. So the current balcony that's there, like I said, it's a 1950s era reconstruction. They did their best using historic photographic evidence to reproduce something similar to what was originally there. But you know, as you'd expect, there's some variation that we have access to a lot of great historic photos now. I'm not sure what they had access to, but you know, we'll try to get a little bit closer with our work. And this photograph, this Carlton Watkins stereograph is been extremely helpful with that. So it's a little hard without me zooming in too closely, but you can see on the smaller view of the stereograph that it actually includes these balconies as well. And we're in the process of replacing the east balcony. For anyone who's been out to the mission for the last several months, there's no balcony there. And we've used this photograph to help define the corbel profiles. When you zoom in, you get a really nice view of them. And also the spindle profiles, which you can actually see pretty well from, you know, just even being zoomed out this far on this image. So yeah, we're working with Bear Joinery. They're a local workshop that does great mesquite work. They're going to recreate it out of mesquite. In some of those later Habs photographs, you can see really nice imagery of the wood grain that allowed us to do wood identification to determine that the balconies were mesquite wood. The reproductions that were put in were actually recycled oak railroad ties. And I didn't say in the beginning, but this the 1950s era of restoration was quite well documented. I mean, it's not the level of documentation that today, you know, with digital cameras and everything, everyone completely documents things, but there's a great photo album. There's some rationale and justification for different decisions. There's all of this information about how they came to that decision to use the recycled railroad ties. They first tried to source old mesquite from folks, but weren't able to find enough. So yeah, that's a little more detail on the balcony. And
So
sorry,
Steph-
Squirrel. Yep.
One follow-up on that. Who was actually doing that restoration? Was it Park Service, the Catholic Church, the...
Thank you. Thank you, Squirrel. It's like you lead tours about this stuff or something.
Oh.
It was done by the City of Tucson architect Ed Herreras and the residing priest at the time, Father Celestine Chin. So it was a collaboration between those two.
We've had another question in the chat.
Mhm.
What's the plan for the reconstruction of the decorative elements of the facade? Cast stone or brick with lime plaster decoration, question mark. Also, what will be the finished color of the restored facade?
Those are good questions. I would say the material question, I'm just going to say it depends. I mean, I tried to give this caveat in the beginning that we're in the exploration phase for a lot of this work. So the way our grant was written allows us the funding to examine a lot of these issues. So the one area we do have sort of a clear idea of what we're doing is when it comes to stabilization of the kind of the decorative work like this, that's sort of the lower relief decorative work on the facade. The elements like the, what are we going to recreate the Estipite columns from, or even the statue? I think that's still to be determined. I mean, our goal is always to use compatible materials and traditional materials where possible. But it also, we have to think about the longevity and wear and maintenance in the future and how those, I mean, if you reproduced it exactly how it was made, we did see that those fell regularly over time. So it's going to be a big question that involves investigation by preservation architect and engineering team who will be hopefully very sensitive to the fact that also whenever you remove elements like that, it could be disruptive to the building. So we're just trying to proceed carefully and study all possible options or evaluate possible options.
So this might
Regarding,
this might be a question for Mathilde, but also from the chat. Somebody's asked, do you think the columns on each level matched, or was each one unique?
No, I think they were all matched in that level, in that tier. They were all for the photos that we have.
Okay.
What I noticed is, for example, in the second tier, I don't remember, it was the second or the third decoration thing. It was like a C, and then in one column was like this, and the next one was like this. Exactly the same decoration, but sometimes curved. And in the first level, there is the element that is like round, not the onions that we said, but the ones that have a flower. The front is flat and the sides is curved. Now you see all of them because what we said, just to give more movement, they changed it. But in original, it was all the same, all the same. And it was half of the question before, which color is going to be the facade?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the original colors of the facade, there were four. There was white, black, ochre, which is yellow, and dark red. Our intention is to remove as much cement as possible, even when it's safety. And that cement gives the whole facade like it was brown. Well, it was never brown. And then at the very end, in 4 or 5 years, what we can see probably is going to be more colors. The background was all the time, or most of the time, white, a whitewash. And then, I don't know, the curtains, the flowers, all that were combining red and ochre, and sometimes black. And that's what you are going to see. Of course, it's not going to look brand new because we never complete the whole thing, but you are going to see more colors and no general brown. I don't know if I answered.
Not like vivid colors like you have in the design on the west transept of the flower that was redone, that is really like bright
Tower.
west tower, that's what I said, yeah. West Tower, I'm sorry, West Tower, where the floral design was redone completely and was painted like in a bright color. We're not gonna do that. We're just gonna tone it down and try to match what's left of the original color.
Like in the
If we
East
need
Tower?
to, yeah, like in the East Tower.
Like
yeah.
in the decoration of the East Tower? I don't know if you have noticed.
If you didn't notice, then it was good. No, really, if you don't notice it, yeah.
Yeah, it will be that result, more or less.
So I think there's another question from the floor that I bumped off by reading the chat.
Uh, Regarding the grant from NPS, how much say will they have in the work since nothing ever seems to be free from the government?
Yeah.
They, so they will have to review our plans, which is just a slight extension of what already, like the process that we already would have had to follow. The State Historic Preservation Office holds an easement on the building, so we do need to have our plans for kind of significant changes reviewed by them. And so they just follow the standard Section 106 process where we submit a work plan articulating exactly what we intend to do. We kind of have to justify our preservation philosophy. So if and when we decide we're going to replace an element, we have to submit all the evidence. I mean, we'll have to package kind of what we just showed you into a more formal report that outlines that we've researched these elements. This is what the design is based off of. Here are the materials we're using. Here's how we plan to do it, and submit that. And they have to give it the okay, which does take a while, and it is slowing down our project right now. But frankly, I feel a little bit of relief just knowing that a large entity is going to kind of sign off on our plans, because we don't want to do anything that might be controversial.
The grant awarding team, however, has said that in terms of the process that we have used to date, in terms of, 3 different research phases, puts us so far ahead of the game in terms of, the thoughtful planning that's going in. And really it's Tim and Matilda and Star and Susie that's leading that whole approach, bringing in really national and international expertise to really assist in the decision making. So I'm feeling like we've got a great partner in the government granting organization. I mean, they're simply following their protocols and procedures, but I think what they're saying is what you're doing, we're going to green light as much as possible because your work is truly thoughtful. And actually, somebody else has come in with another question about the federal grant, asking, will it cover the cost of the entire project, or do you anticipate a special fundraising effort to complete the facade? It's impressive that the scope of this work is so complex. To answer that question, we had assembled almost $500,000 towards the first 3 phases of the project. The most expensive phases will be the last section, where we're actually making determinations about reproducing key elements like the statue and the Astipite columns, if that's the approach we determine we will use. And so we recognize that it's really phases 4 and 5, and probably the winter of 24-25 and 25-26 that will be the most expensive phases. So in fact, this grant means that we've got a new partner to do the early work, which means that we can push our own funding back. So we're thinking that across the next couple of years of our fundraising locally and nationally towards developing cash for the specific project has worked as it has across the last 2 years, that we will be on track to have all of the $1.4 to $5 million that the project will require in hand. So to answer your question, we're not looking at doing, say, a special capital campaign. We really see the way to funding the total project being within our regular fundraising purview. Well, that was the last of the questions from chat. Are there any other questions or comments? Well, let me just say it's really helpful that we have so many people showing interest in this. It really is part of our outreach to get in front of as many constituent groups as we can. And of course, this group, Friends of Patronato, is really our most important local constituent group. So we will be continuing to come back to you periodically with more information about the project. And if you have questions or are interested, we're planning probably in March, when the scaffolding is still in place, to have another of our very successful open houses at the mission. And for this particular one, we will have conservators on hand to be able to talk specifically about the phases of the project that are ongoing at that point in March. So we don't have a date exactly, probably the second week in March. We were waiting for the powwow at the on the reservation to be determined. Those dates are now in place, so we'll be getting back quite quickly to set a date for the open house. So as soon as we have it, we'll put it out on our contact list and mark your calendars. And I did have something come in just now. Do you plan to have the December concert? Yes, Diane, we do. It's going to be 10th and 11th of December. Tickets will go on sale to the general public probably this weekend. Go to our website and the tickets will be available there. Still lots of seats available, but just 4 sections this year.
Will it become available again, as it has in the past, to watch it? To watch that particular performance?
For the concert?
Yes.
What we've done is we've collated material from across the last 3 years, and we are going to make that available to all of our donors who are gifting through the end of year campaign. It will be the same performance that you've seen in the past, but of course, it's always great whenever you see it.
Yes. Thank you. I really look forward to that.
Too expensive to try making one of those every year. Okay, so no questions coming in, but lots of thank yous. So that's nice. I'm glad you've all appreciated it. And we really appreciate you taking the time out of your morning to join us. And we'll let you know when our next Friends of Patronato lecture is taking place, probably early in the new year.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye now. Signing off.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tim and Matilda.
Yes.